What surprised me most was how a single awkward moment can stick with you for years. My first day at a new school, I walked into the wrong classroom twice. It felt like everyone noticed, but looking back, I realized those moments actually helped me break the ice with classmates.
That's interesting because research shows that nearly 70% of students report feeling anxious on their first day. It's not just about fitting in, it's the uncertainty of new routines, teachers, and even finding your locker. I remember memorizing the school map the night before, but still getting lost.
Oh, I totally relate. I once spilled juice on my shirt before homeroom, and I was convinced everyone would remember me as the juice girl. But by the end of the week, nobody cared. It's funny how those first-day disasters seem huge in the moment, but they fade so quickly.
Here's the takeaway. First impressions matter, but they're rarely permanent. What really counts is how you respond. I started making jokes about my mix-ups, and it actually helped me make friends faster.
Exactly. There's evidence that schools with structured orientation programs see smoother transitions for new students. Even simple things, like student buddies or welcome tours, can cut down on anxiety and help everyone settle in.
If I could give advice, it'd be, don't stress about being perfect. Most people are too busy worrying about themselves to remember your little mistakes. And if you see someone looking lost, just say hi. It makes a huge difference.
Only after 2 iterations of chemistry class did I realize how much a teacher's energy could transform a subject. My high school chemistry teacher, Mr. Patel, had this way of making even the periodic table feel like a puzzle worth solving.
That's interesting, because I always thought math was intimidating until Miss Rivera started using real-world problems, like calculating recipes or planning trips to make equations feel relevant. Studies show students are 40% more likely to retain concepts when they see practical applications.
Can I ask, do you think it's more about the teacher's personality or the way they connect lessons to our lives? My favorite was literature, but mostly because Mrs. Lee let us pick books that matched our interests.
I'd say it's both. A teacher's enthusiasm is contagious, but when they tailor content to students' experiences, it sticks. For example, Mr. Patel once brought in homemade soap to explain saponification suddenly. Chemistry wasn't just theory.
There's also a shift in education styles now. Project-based learning and flipped classrooms are becoming more common, and research from 2022 suggests these methods can boost engagement by up to 30% compared to traditional lectures.
I partly agree, but sometimes those new methods can be overwhelming if you're shy or need more structure. I loved when teachers balanced group work with clear instructions.
Here's the takeaway. The most memorable teachers adapt their approach, making subjects accessible and inspiring, no matter the method. Only after 2 iterations of switching friend groups did I realize how much those early bonds shaped my confidence. It's not just about who you sit with at lunch, it's about who you become in those moments.
That's so true. There's actually research showing that students with at least one close school friend report 30% higher levels of self-esteem by graduation. It's fascinating how those connections can buffer against the stress of adolescence.
But what if your closest friend suddenly joins a different group? I remember feeling totally lost when that happened. It made me question if I was interesting enough, or if I'd done something wrong.
I partly agree, but sometimes those shifts force you to grow. When my best friend moved away, I ended up joining the debate club, something I'd never have tried otherwise. That experience opened up a whole new circle for me.
Can you explain that in more detail? I'm curious how you navigated the change. Did you actively seek out new friends, or did it happen more by chance?
It was a mix. At first, I felt awkward, but I noticed the debate team welcomed anyone willing to participate. Over time, shared goals like prepping for competitions made us close. It wasn't instant, but it was real.
I think social media makes it even trickier now. You can see your old friends hanging out without you, and that stings. But it also means you can stay in touch with people who move away. So it's a double-edged sword.
Absolutely. There's evidence that online connections can maintain friendships across distance, but they can also amplify feelings of exclusion. The key seems to be balancing online and offline interactions.
Only after 2 iterations of trying out different clubs did I realize how much joining the debate team changed my approach to problem solving. It wasn't just about arguing, it was about listening, adapting, and thinking on my feet.
That's interesting because I found a totally different dynamic on the soccer team. According to our coach, over 60% of our players improved their grades during the season, which really shows how structure and teamwork can spill over into academics.
Can I ask, did you ever feel overwhelmed balancing all those activities with homework? Sometimes I'd get home from art club and feel like I had zero energy left for studying.
Absolutely. The key for me was learning to prioritize. There were weeks when I had to skip a club meeting to prep for exams, but I noticed that the leadership roles I took on taught me to manage my time better overall.
I partly agree, but I think there's also value in just participating, even if you're not aiming for a leadership spot. Some of the most creative ideas on our team came from people who weren't captains. They just loved being part of the group.
That makes sense. For me, joining the drama club wasn't about winning competitions. It was about finding a place where I could express myself and make friends outside my usual circle.
Here's the takeaway. Whether you're leading or just showing up, these activities shape how you handle challenges, work with others, and discover what really motivates you. Only after 2 failed math tests did I realize how much pressure students put on themselves to keep up. The real breakthrough came when I started asking for help instead of trying to handle everything alone.
That's interesting, because research shows that nearly 60% of students report feeling overwhelmed by academic demands at least once a semester. But the presence of even one supportive adult, like a teacher or counselor, can significantly reduce stress levels.
I remember feeling completely lost during group projects. It wasn't just the assignments, but also worrying about fitting in. What helped me most was when a classmate noticed and invited me to join their study group.
Here's the takeaway. Resilience isn't about never struggling. It's about finding ways to adapt, whether that's reaching out for support or learning from setbacks.
Can you explain that in more detail? For example, what role do you think schools should play in building that kind of resilience?
Schools can make a difference by normalizing conversations about failure and providing resources like peer mentoring or mental health workshops. When students see that setbacks are part of the process, it changes their whole approach.
I partly agree, but sometimes those resources aren't easy to access. If you're shy or worried about judgment, it can feel impossible to reach out. Maybe schools could do more to make support visible and approachable.
That's a good point. Data from student surveys suggest that when support systems are actively promoted, like through classroom visits or anonymous drop-in sessions, participation rates go up by as much as 30%.
Only after 2 iterations, we realized how much the annual talent show shaped our school's atmosphere. It wasn't just about who could sing or dance. It was the one event where every grade mixed, and even the shyest students got a moment in the spotlight.
That's so true. I remember our Spirit Week statistically, participation jumped by nearly 40% when student councils added inclusive themes, like Decades Day instead of just sports jerseys. It really changed who felt comfortable joining in.
Can I ask, did anyone ever feel left out during those events? Because I always worried that some traditions, like homecoming court, made it hard for everyone to feel included.
You're right to question that. The homecoming court was controversial. Some students felt it reinforced popularity contests. But when leadership switched to peer nominations based on kindness, the vibe shifted. Here's the takeaway. Small changes in tradition can make a big difference.
And it's not just about feeling good. Studies show that schools with strong, inclusive traditions report higher student satisfaction and even better attendance during event weeks. It's a measurable impact on culture.
I partly agree, but I still wonder if some traditions should be retired altogether. Like, do we really need senior pranks? Sometimes those just create stress for staff and underclassmen.
That's a fair point. Some rituals outlive their usefulness. The best traditions evolve when students lead the change. Events stay relevant and meaningful, instead of just repeating the past. Only after 2 iterations, we realized our group was missing deadlines because nobody wanted to take the lead. That's when I saw how quickly a project can stall without clear roles.
That's so true. Research from the American Educational Research Association shows that groups with defined responsibilities finish tasks 30% faster. But I've noticed, even with roles, there's always someone who contributes less. What's your strategy for handling that?
I usually try to talk to them privately. Sometimes they're just overwhelmed or confused about what to do. Once, I found out a teammate didn't even know how to use the shared document.
That's a good point. Communication gaps can be subtle. I've started using checklists and quick daily updates, nothing fancy, just enough to keep everyone on track.
But do you think group projects actually teach teamwork, or do they just highlight who's organized and who isn't? I've seen some students get frustrated and disengage completely.
I think it depends on how the teacher sets it up. When we had peer evaluations, people seemed more motivated to participate. It felt fairer, and I wasn't stuck doing all the work.
Here's the takeaway. Group projects can work, but only if there's structure and accountability. Otherwise, you risk turning collaboration into chaos. Only after 2 iterations of switching tables did I realize how much the unwritten seating rules shape who you talk to during lunch. It's almost like a silent agreement certain tables are for certain groups, and crossing that line can feel like a big deal.
That's so true. I remember how the so-called cool table always had the kids with the trendiest snacks like those bento boxes or the latest flavored chips. It wasn't just about the food, but what it said about you.
But sometimes, sharing food was the easiest way to make friends. I traded my apple slices for a homemade cookie once, and that started a whole new friendship.
Here's the takeaway. Those small trades and seat choices actually build social networks. It's not just about eating, it's about belonging.
I wonder, though, how do schools handle kids who can't bring those cool snacks or have dietary restrictions? Some cafeterias try to offer more options, but I've seen situations where kids feel left out.
My school started a program last year where everyone could get a free lunch, and it made things feel a lot more equal. People stopped comparing lunches so much.
That's a good point. When schools address food equity, it shifts the focus from what you have to who you're with. It's a subtle change, but it matters. Last week, we got stuck on a math problem during a timed test, and I could feel the pressure building in the room. It made me wonder how much of our performance is about knowledge versus just handling stress.
That's a real issue. According to a 2022 survey by the American Psychological Association, over 60% of students reported feeling significant anxiety before exams. It's not just about what you know your ability to manage that anxiety can make or break your grade.
I always get super nervous before big tests, even if I studied a lot. Sometimes I wish schools would let us show what we know in different ways, like projects or presentations, instead of just one big exam.
Here's the takeaway. If we only measure students with standardized tests, we might miss out on their real strengths. I've seen classmates who freeze up during exams but shine when they're working on group projects.
Can you explain that in more detail? For instance, do you think alternative assessments actually reduce stress, or do they just shift the pressure somewhere else?
For me, group projects feel less scary because you can talk things through and get feedback. But I guess if you're shy, that could be stressful too. Maybe having a mix would help everyone find their best way to show what they've learned.
I partly agree, but there's also the question of fairness. Some parents worry that without clear grades, it's harder to know how their kids are doing compared to others. Still, mental health should be a priority. Only after 2 iterations, we realized how much the classroom dynamic shifts when every student has a tablet. The pace of lessons changed, and suddenly, group work became more interactive, but also more distracting for some.
That's interesting, because studies show that students using digital devices can process information faster, but there's also a 2019 survey indicating that over 60% of teachers worry about increased screen time affecting attention spans.
Can I ask, do you think it's harder for teachers to keep everyone engaged now? My little cousin says her class sometimes gets sidetracked by games or chatting apps during lessons.
Absolutely. Managing distractions is a real challenge. But on the flip side, teachers can track participation in real time and adapt their approach instantly, which wasn't possible with chalkboards.
I partly agree, but there's also the digital divide to consider. Not every student has reliable internet or a device at home, so tech can widen gaps unless schools provide support.
That makes sense. I remember when our school got a single projector. It felt like a huge upgrade, but only certain classes could use it. Now, some schools have 3D printers, while others still share old computers.
Here's the takeaway. Technology can empower learning, but it's only as effective as the support systems and training behind it. Schools need to adapt quickly, but also make sure no one's left behind. Only after walking across that stage did I realize how much those years had shaped me not just academically, but in ways I never expected.
That moment is so layered. There's the pride of finishing, but also this ache when you hug friends, knowing routines will never be quite the same. I remember our class tradition. Everyone wrote a note to their future self, and reading mine years later was surprisingly emotional.
I still have my yearbook, covered in scribbles and inside jokes. It's funny how some friendships faded, but others became even stronger after graduation. I think the uncertainty made us cling to what mattered most.
Statistically, about 60% of graduates report feeling anxious about the next step, whether it's college or work. That blend of excitement and fear is almost universal.
If I could give advice to anyone about to graduate, it's to embrace the goodbyes. They're proof that something meaningful happened. And don't rush to have everything figured out. Most people don't.
I agree, and I'd add, take photos, write letters, even if it feels cheesy. Those little things become treasures when you look back.
Here's the takeaway. Graduation isn't just an ending, it's a launch pad. The lessons, the friendships, even the farewells, all become part of who you are as you step into what's next. Thanks for sharing these memories and insights with us.